Great once again to be joined by Massachusetts Senate Minority Leader Bruce Tarr. Senator Tarr, welcome once again to MSO. Nice to see you.
Hi, Rick. Great to see you and great to be with you.
Thank you, sir. So much going on right now, and we're still, it's funny, the election, COVID, all this other stuff, the weather, and yet the work at the Massachusetts legislature continues, and you've got an update with us with respect to the budget.
Yeah, the pace is actually intensifying, Rick. We've talked a few times about having to wait to do a lot of state budgeting just because of the uncertainty of what would happen at the federal level and what would happen with our own tax collections. But at some point, we do have to make decisions about the financial stability of the state, and all of that is beginning to happen right now. So we this afternoon in the Senate, because we take the last step in the process, finished with doing the so-called closeout supplemental budget. The House did it yesterday, we did it today. And basically, this is a budget that accounts for all the remaining funds after the end of the fiscal year. And you'll remember that fiscal year 2020 ended on July 1st. We are now into fiscal year 2021. So we have to do something that's a lot like reconciling your checkbook at home. We have to look at the end of the fiscal year, see what money we have left, see what obligations we have left, and we have to address all those things. And so that is now on its way to the governor's desk. It's about a $423 million spending document. It was passed really without too much effort in terms of having to have debate and differences of opinion. There really wasn't much of that. And we got it passed, and now it's going to Governor Baker for his signature. So I feel good about that. I feel good about the fact that we're going to be able to close the books on the prior fiscal year. And just to give you a sense of timing, that usually happens sometime in October. So we're behind schedule, but we're not that far behind schedule. So that's, given the circumstances, it's pretty reasonable. But then on top of that, the main thing that we have to do is a budget for the remainder of fiscal year 2021, the rest of it after November. And the House, to me, somewhat surprisingly, announced this week that they're going to do that next week. They're going to debate the entire fiscal year 2021 budget starting next Tuesday. So we're taping right now on Friday afternoon. House members have until 8 o'clock tonight to submit their budget amendments, and that debate will start next Tuesday. It'll probably take a couple of days, and then the budget will come to us in the Senate, and we're actually already working on what our budget's going to look like. And then we'll pass a budget probably not very long from right now, and then go into the reconciliation process to reconcile the differences between the two and send a final document to the governor. So things are really starting to move quickly after having moved very slowly and not at all because of some of the constraints that we've been facing.
Is there a sense of the effects of COVID with respect to the budget at this point? Because we're what, 7, 8, 9 months into the pandemic now?
I'm sorry, Rick, I didn't hear the question.
Is there an idea of the effect of COVID on the budget in terms of pluses and minuses?
There is. So one of the things that I think is very notable about Massachusetts is that we always try to get a joint revenue estimate that then the House, the Senate, and the administration work from. And usually that's done in January, and it starts the budget process for the coming fiscal year. But of course, the one that we had from this past January has been rendered irrelevant by what's happened with the COVID-19 pandemic. So recently, the Ways and Means Committees and the Secretary of Administration and Finance had another hearing, and they had a panel of people get together, and basically what they predicted was that we would see a revenue shortfall of between $2 and $5 billion. And so when the governor recently revised his budget proposal to get this process started, he used an estimate of about $3.55 billion in terms of what we would have as a budget gap. And that's what everyone is using. So that's been the agreed to number now in terms of what we think the effect of the pandemic will be. And one of the significant differences is that in the House version of the budget, in order to help close that gap, the House takes a little bit more of a withdrawal from the stabilization fund. They take about $1.55 billion. The governor would take out about $1.35 billion. And in the Senate, we're trying to figure out what the right number is that we're going to use. But there aren't that many differences other than a couple of things between the House budget and what the governor has proposed. And I think that's a sign of what you're going to see. I don't think you're going to see people trying to stake out ground on the budget that is radically different from everybody else. I think you're going to see an effort to try to stay within a certain set of boundaries, not to have radical changes in public policy attempted to be achieved through the budget, which can sometimes be the case. I think you're going to see a much more streamlined budget process so that we can give some fiscal stability, not only to our own budgeting, but for people to understand what the Commonwealth is going to do for the remainder of the fiscal year.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, next on the agenda, I got to, excuse me for putting these new thingies on here. With respect to COVID, the governor has pulled back a little bit on some things, increased restrictions a little bit. But what's the effect on schools right now, Senator? Because we're pretty much almost halfway through the first semester in schools.
Well, we are, and it's been a very fluid situation, Rick. And we've seen schools who are allowed to make their own decisions, and that's something that's been very clear from the administration and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And we've seen a whole combination or different combinations of things in different communities where some have been remote learning, some have had in-person. A really large number have done the so-called hybrid model, which is a combination of those two. But the newest guidance that's coming out from Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and is really coming from the position of the governor is that there hasn't been a lot of evidence of transmission of COVID-19 in our schools. And so the newest guidance is that regardless of where you are on the map in terms of being a red community, which is high risk, or a green community, which is lower risk, regardless of those things, you should be attempting to do some form of in-person learning. Maybe not all the time, maybe it's a hybrid model, but the thought is that there is more to look at here than just the situation of the physical health of students, and that their mental health is also being affected by this situation, and having some in-person learning makes some sense. So that's a bit of a change. And then related to that, the map itself is being recalibrated because determining the risk level of a community has been done up until now by looking at the percentage of positive tests in that community. And a number of smaller communities have said, that doesn't paint an accurate portrayal of us because we don't have as many people. So if we get a few cases as a percentage, it looks very large. So there are now going to be 3 tiers by which communities are going to be evaluated. The first one is going to be, and I just got to look to make sure I get it right. The first one is under 10,000 people. The next one is 10,000 to 50,000 people. And the third one is more than 50,000 people. And the idea is now we'll correlate the population to the test rate to get a clearer picture of which risk category the community is in. Now, doing that has a really dramatic effect. So last week we had, I believe it was 121 communities in the high risk category. By recalibrating in the way that I've just described, the newest map shows only 16 communities in the high risk category. And the governor has been saying this for a while, that we need to have a matrix and we need to have information that is more accurate and more specific. And this map is an attempt to do that. And of course, you can see all of these things on mass.gov, where there's a lot of information about the pandemic, and see really what's happening with regard to how we view different communities.
All right, that sounds good. Off the wall question. In fact, I have 2 of them. First of all, do you think there's any chance with this new idea of kids being in school or the low transmission rate that that high school sports will be able to continue in the winter? And I know that's not your field of expertise, but maybe just kind of a gut feeling on that?
Well, it's hard to predict, but I think we may be headed in that direction.
Excellent.
And again, as I said, it's a very fluid situation, Rick, because on the flip side, we have seen very significant increases over the last couple of weeks in the number of cases, right, if we just look at the raw numbers. And that's why you have new restrictions and new guidance that went into effect for today, basically. Again, today is Friday. And, we've had a advisory and guidance about staying home and not moving around between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. We've had new restrictions on restaurants being not able to do
I gotta tell you,
dining.
I can't move around much between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. anyway. I'd like to know that. So it really doesn't affect me.
I think you still get around pretty well.
Yeah.
But my point is, what you're seeing is a very tailored effort. So the governor is saying, in schools, we don't have this much of a problem, but in other settings, we do. And what's been particularly concerning is people gathering for in homes for gatherings. And we're particularly thinking about that as the holidays approach. That has been a source of transmission. And so in an attempt to be responsive to that, the governor has issued the new guidance and the new executive orders.
Final question, Bruce. Senator, you mentioned holidays, and it's a very important holiday coming up. I wouldn't call it a solemn holiday this week, but it's an important holiday, and that is Veterans Day. And I know that you were always very active in that throughout your constituency.
Well, very much, Rick. And one of the things that I think is important to think about is the pandemic has disrupted just about every aspect of our lives, but it can't disrupt our commemoration of our veterans and our support for our veterans. And so I'm so pleased that communities all across our region are doing things, sometimes remotely, sometimes with very small gatherings, but we are not going to stop recognizing veterans on Veterans Day. And I was very pleased today to be at City Hall, where Adam Kukuru and V. Ciparini from the Gloucester Cape Ann now Veterans Office actually conducted the ceremony for Gloucester in City Hall and recorded it so that it will be played on 1623 Studios channel on Veterans Day. I'm also in the midst of producing a special video that I've been recording at the State House that we will post on social media for Veterans Day. So I think it's absolutely imperative to think about the fact that our veterans dealt with incredible disruptions in their lives. They dealt with incredible hardship. They were isolated. They were separated from their families. The same kind of things in some ways that we're dealing with right now. They never stopped fighting for the things that make us a great nation, and we can never stop doing the things we need to do to support them.